I see a lot of people talking about hardware specifications for all of these games. One thing that a lot of the conversation is missing is when these consoles come out here with all of this talk about, hardware and unique performance and all that, you really need to take into account what they're saying and look at all kinds of hardware parameters that you can get your hands on. I say this simply because as new games are coming out, more and more they continue to still dial into what would be considered affordable hardware. At first, I used to dial into this whole thing that, they're pretty much sticking with what we call old hardware, but now even the newer hardware in terms of the way production has kind of come in line, supply and demand in terms of this is being met, and because there's now enough supply, prices are being driven down. You can see that, some of these developers are starting to maybe want to leverage the newer hardware, even though they're still, in a sense, what we'll call affordable. I'm showing you guys Indiana Jones here and a Great Circle, and its so-called minimum requirements at the moment. The developers are asking for an i7. It's vague. It's just an i7 3.3 gigahertz or better. So that's any i7 you can find that has that kind of clock speed, which honestly, almost all i7s, from what I know anyways, from Skylake and up, maybe even probably lower, would have that. When I say Skylake, I'm talking 2015, 2016. This is just off the top of my head. If I made a mistake, somebody correct me, please. And then they're asking you to have an RTX 2060, 8 gigs, or an RTX 2060, or an RX 6600, 8 gigs. Now, the 6600, guys, is actually a very affordable GPU. So all of that talk that they've been making all this while, saying, oh, you need the PS5 Pro or the Series X this or the yada dee da, needs all of this boom. You're just yelling all over the place in everybody's ears. It's all a wash at the end of the day, because the RX 6600 right now is a $200 GPU, $199. Now, if you guys watched my last video where I talked about how I pulled up my receipts from when I built my PC in 2016, the GPU that I paid $190 to $200 for was an RX 480, 4 gigabytes. 4 gigabytes of VRAM, that particular GPU. And I pointed it out in this video to say, man, game affordability, PC building affordability is no longer this misnomer at the end of the day. It's a reality that we can actually get our hands on. And developers are not going to basically just abandon the affordable hardware class. They're going to stick with it. I can understand the old hardware class being something that they probably move away from eventually, but still, they have to stay within the reins and the parameters of hardware that people can actually afford and most people are going to play and leverage, which is very interesting. It was so interesting to go back and look at those prices because at the end of the day, it was cool to see that, CPU and GPU prices, having leveled out in this generation so far after all of the madness that was going on, it's just such a beautiful thing. I was very, very pleased that an RX 480 at the time in 2016 compared to an RX 480 in today's day and age, an RX 6600, 8 gigs more VRAM, that's twice the amount of VRAM. Overall, insane performance difference is basically the same price point. That's so cool. And what's even better is that a lot of these developers are going to be taking advantage of that. Now, this doesn't mean that the old hardware within the same category is not going to be able to do the job. The developers are just pretty much covering their bases, knowing that they've tested a specific spec of hardware, and that hardware is what's going to carry the game without them having to worry about any older hardware out there. Because if you're looking at it this is an 8 gig VRAM, GPU, so we know, or from what we can hypothesize, is a GPU like the GTX 1080 Ti is more than likely going to get the job done. Sure, you'll probably be getting 60 FPS 1080, maybe 45 FPS 1080p if the game is super high on textures that that generation of GPUs are not necessarily too suited for. But you're still going to be able to get a very respectable performance and experience overall. It's interesting though, because the recommended requirements just say requires a 64-bit processor and operating system. Because again, this game was around 2000, and I think it was probably negotiated right before the acquisition, and then hardware specifications that were available at the time were still much older. So yes, I don't think the developers are going to abandon the GTX and the old Radeon, specs in terms of this. But it's very interesting overall. Another thing that you can also consider is if you think about, say, even, Bethesda games like Doom, Dark Ages, I don't even know if they have anything there yet. They don't have anything there yet. It's all TBD. Or if we look at maybe even PlayStation games, right? What is the latest PlayStation game coming to PC? It's God of War Ragnarok. I think that's what we have now in terms of the next few days. If you look at Ragnarok, even Ragnarok itself is not moving too far away from this archetype. The RX 5500, which is basically close to what's inside of the Series S, or the GTX 1060, 6 gigs. So 6 gigabytes of VRAM, 8 gigs of RAM. I saw somebody put in my comment section today saying, developers are moving away from older hardware and all that stuff. No, they really can't. In order for them to maintain profitability, they cannot seriously do that, because if they do that, they're going to harm their player base. So they really have to take very, huge care and caution to ensure that they're not going to go isolate their own possible customers, if you understand what I mean. So if you look at the Steam hardware survey, that's, in my opinion, the best tool for developers. Steam is a storefront, so they have to give developers all the tools that they possibly can within legal means. And I think this hardware survey, a lot of developers probably have it posted somewhere around their wall. So literally, their analysts will basically come and say, hey man, here's your PC specs that you probably need to meet in order for us to be able to at least reach the highest number of possible people we can, reach. So anybody who can, about 47% of people have 16 gigs of VRAM, of RAM, which is good. So you can demand 16 gigs of RAM, but beware, you will segment a huge chunk of your market. Okay? Which, if you think about it, 30% has 32 gigs of RAM. So a lot of people have RAM. RAM's cheap. But the percentage you're going to segment, if you go 16 gigs of RAM, if you can't make your game to work properly, you're going to isolate about 10% of those people. That's a good margin. Don't do it, because Steam has, hundreds of millions of people. So you don't want to actually take that step. So keep your game running with 8 gigs of RAM, respectively. 30 FPS, most of these games can do it easily. God of War Ragnarok, it ran on a PS4, so it's not a problem. Right? And then you come back and look at the requirements and look at GPU requirements, which is also another really cool one that you can take a look at. And you notice that the GPU requirements in this particular category, let's go ahead and look at it, is anywhere from the RTX 3060. 5% of people are using this in this category. I mean, it's spread out. 1660, where's the GTX 1060? There it is, 2.86. A lot of people still using this. As many people as have a 4060 Ti. Actually, less people have a 4060 Ti than have a GTX 1060. The 1060, is still more than the 3050 and the 4070. So it's still a GPU that developers have to continue to work with and be bound by. This is why when people say the Series S is holding console, but I just say, get out of here. Those developers are going to bring their games to Xbox if they want to bring their games to Xbox. Because here on PC, they got to squeeze performance into these machines by fire, by force. That's why Ubisoft and EA you don't hear them ever complain about the Series S. They just pump out the games and throw it on there. And From Software and all the guys that are here to do business, they pump out their games and they put it on the hardware that can take the hardware. So they understand the assignment, and that's exactly what it is that they want to do. So I've seen some PC gamers, or I don't know if they're PC gamers, come on the channel. They tell me, these PCs that you're recommending for people to build, they're not the best thing. They're not future-proof and blah, blah. No. You're watching everybody on YouTube tell you about future-proofing, but how many of them are actually looking at the data that the developers are using to make the games? I'm not saying that they're all wrong. I'm just saying that, in their case, they have access to all this hardware almost for free in many cases because the manufacturers send them the hardware components. Have you thought about that? And you and everybody else don't have access to those manufacturers, so you have limited dollars. So sure, if you want to spend more money, please do, but there's a huge percentage of people that will buy games to play on those hardware pieces, which is exactly the point of these videos. So again, I think there's a lot of, misconception that's not really paying attention to the data, but again, You play what you want to play. You play how you want to play. It's your choice in that regard. I'll go ahead and end the video, and I want to hear your thoughts in the comment section. Thanks so much for watching. Appreciate you guys so much. Peace out.